I'm Russ McLean, Chairman of the Patient Voices Group, and this afternoon, the 23rd of August, I'm with the Chief Executive of East Lancashire Hospitals Trust, Mr. Kevin McGee. Kevin, hello.
Hello Russ, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, and you look like you've been well rested for your holiday.
We've just been away to Devon for a week and it was really nice weather, so we had some good food, we had some good weather and lots of long walks on the beach.
And I think you need a break, don't you? Kevin, I'd first of all like to start our chat this afternoon with quite a story that's kicked up a furore, if you will, locally. And this is the story concerning disabled car parking charges. It was widely reported in the daily and national press that you've decided to charge disabled drivers for parking. Would you like to tell me more about that?
So many trusts up and down the country already do this. We've not done this at all, and what we've been looking at is ways that we can try and manage our budget in a different way and get more income to support frontline services and the delivery of frontline services, because as with most public sectors we are under financial pressure. So we've looked at car parking across all of our sites, and we've done two things. One, we are proposing that we charge staff across all our sites, because previously we weren't charging staff in the community hospitals for parking, and patients as well. And we're also looking at introducing, as you say, car parking charges for disabled people.
I think, and let me please, if I could play devil's advocate here, I think the story was reported in the press a little one-sided, because we had some other people, we had some disabled people in the press reporting that they were quite happy that you were bringing disabled charges. But I think in general the public are a little unclear, because for years you've told us that the car parking was run by a third party, and now it looks like the trust obviously has something to do with the parking, and trust is making money off the back of it. So there's a lot of confusion. Would you mind clearing that up for me?
So our car parking on the Burnley site and on the Blackburn site is run by third parties. In our community hospitals it's run through the trust, but they are clearly much smaller. We actually don't get a lot of income as a consequence of.
But you get some.
We get some, but it's fairly minimal in terms of the income that we do get from car parking, because it's managed by a third party on this site and on the Burnley site. But what we try to do is to look at equity across all of the sites, and try to look at equity between all our staff and all our patients, and introducing charges that we believe are fair. Our charges are strong in comparison to other trusts, i.e. they are lower than most other trusts, both locally and nationally, and we're one of the trusts who have the lowest cost nationally for car parking.
Well, I'd like to add, of course, that a lot of trusts across the UK, as you quite rightly pointed out, do now charge for their parking. But I'd like, if possible, to read to you a letter from a 52-year-old female who's actually given me permission, obviously, to share this with you. She has shared her name and address, but I'm not going to do that in the recording. She says that she lives with an incurable disease, namely multiple sclerosis, and she lives in Blackburn. My disease, she goes on, inevitably makes my life very hard indeed. If I had to pay each time for an appointment, I would definitely have to make a choice between eating, heating, and parking fees. It would incredibly increase my stress levels and stretch my finances to the limit. Please think about how this will affect me and people like myself in getting the medical attention they deserve and not having to make a choice detrimental to their health. Now, one of the reasons I picked that particular letter, we've had a few, the Patient Voices Group has had a few, is that I don't think people who are not on low incomes perhaps don't appreciate that £1.90 per hour doesn't sound like a lot, but if that is coming out of a weekly budget of sort of welfare benefits and sickness benefits, and you're here for a couple of hours at a time, then those fees can certainly rack up.
Yes, and look, I understand that this is really difficult, but what we do offer, the charges that you're quoting are not actually the right charges, because if people who use our services on a regular basis, they can get significant discounts and they can buy longer term tickets, and that gives them a significantly reduced rate. So we have tried to be as sensitive as we can to patients and relatives who would use our services on a regular basis.
Now, I know from being involved with the hospital for a number of years that you already have several schemes whereby patients, for instance, who are coming for cancer treatments and their relatives can have parking which is subsidised. Is that going to continue?
Yes, absolutely. But we're not changing any of that. We're simply going through the process of trying to get a degree of equity across all our sites in terms of our car parking.
Staying on that subject, the Daily Mirror reports that the Trust's own figures, the income from disabled parking charges would be around £200,000 a year, which is quite a significant amount of money.
Well, clearly the Daily Mirror got that actually completely incorrect, because that £200,000 is for all of the increases, both for staff, for patients and for disabled patients.
Okay, and it also goes on to call you a cash-strapped trust. Now, you and I have both spoken over the last few months about how the trust is investing in various things. So, are you cash-strapped?
So I would say that every trust in the country has financial constraints and financial pressures. We are funded through taxation, through the public purse, and clearly we have to use every penny that we've got in an appropriate way. So we are tight for cash, but actually we manage our financial resources really well, and we're one of the best, I think, financially managed organisations, trusts in the country.
Well, let's stay with finances. One of the other things that made the headlines was your remuneration, as it were. You know, this came out during the disabled car parking round. The public have been made aware that your salary is reported to be a staggering £185,000 a year. And they go on to say that's £41,000 a year more than the Prime Minister. So at a time when the NHS is facing unprecedented cuts to services and your trust is having to charge disabled drivers to apparently boost their income, how can your salary be justified when it seems that, certainly in terms of financial rewards, running a trust is more profitable than running a country?
So chief execs within the NHS are on a remuneration on salaries. They are set externally and they are benchmarked externally, so I don't set the salary. All our salaries are a matter of public record. They are published every year within our annual accounts. So if people look in the annual accounts, they'll see that the figure that's actually quoted in the Daily Mirror is incorrect. But it is a salary that's set externally and it is benchmarked, and actually for an organisation our size with a turnover of £500 million, employing nearly 8,000 staff, actually it's one of the lower chief exec salaries of this in the range.
So are you worth the money?
So I don't set the salary. The salary is externally benchmarked, and it is competitive with other areas.
Hospital trusts across the country are struggling to meet ELHT targets. Could you perhaps, for those patients that don't know, remind us what the targets are, and are you meeting yours?
So the target is that 95% of all patients who come in through accident and emergency or urgent care services should be seen within 4 hours. At this point, we're not meeting the 95%. Historically, we've had a good performance, but we're not currently meeting that 95%. And we are working really hard to make sure that we do, and we improve on that performance. Lots of reasons why that's the case. We've had some staff shortages, particularly in terms of doctors. A&E is a really difficult area nationally to recruit doctors, and we're no different to that. We're also seeing an impact from changes around our borders as well. So in April, stroke services closed in Airedale, and we've seen some impact on that. Some of your listeners will be aware that services have been changed on for A&E services on the Chorley site, and that's had a small impact on us. And recently there's been changes in paediatric services on the Bury site. So all of those changes around the margin, combined with issues in terms of staffing, have put pressure on our A&E departments and our urgent care services.
ITV News has reported today that over the last 12 months, 16 hospitals have had to suspend any acute services, and Airedale, which you just mentioned, was one of those. Do you think that's going to come to East Lancashire? Is that going to happen here?
We've got no plans for that at this point in time. I think we have to continually look at how services are delivered across East Lancashire. The clinical technology, new drugs, people's aspirations and expectations change, and we need to think about the services continually and how those services are developed continually. So I could never say never, but we have no plans at this point to close any of our services.
We spoke just a moment ago about A&E, and there are reports of a super hospital just dealing with emergency cases. I think it's in Northumberland. Is that something you can see coming to East Lancashire? A super hospital just dealing with heart attacks and broken bones and things?
Well, that was based on a completely new build, and I don't think that will be the case, because we've got some good hospitals and good hospital buildings across East Lancashire. But what we are doing more and more is, if you like, we are trying to separate the emergency work from the planned work. So more of the emergency work is taking place on the Blackburn site, and more of the planned work is taking place on the Burnley site, and that allows us to separate the two and make sure that we don't have to stop elective work if we come under too much pressure on the emergency side.
Let's talk about pressures. NHS England have recently told trusts that they should cancel planned operations if they're under pressure. We've got winter pressures coming up. Is that something that you think the trust is going to have to do, cancel operations?
Well, when we've been through the junior doctor strikes over the last few months, some elective planned work was cancelled, but we tried to keep that to a minimum. I think we're quite lucky the way we're set up, having the Burnley site and having the Blackburn site, and then having our community hospitals, and it does allow us to have that separation more than many places. So we are looking to continue to do that, to push that, and hopefully we won't be in the place where we have to cancel elective activity.
In your recent blog, you talk about junior doctors and junior doctor placements. Could you tell us about that?
So one of the things we're really proud of is that we offer a great training environment for junior doctors, and it's really important because those junior doctors, if they choose to come and work in East Lancashire, they'll be our senior clinical staff doctors for the future. So we offer a really strong training environment, and we've just gone through a rotation. So one group of junior doctors have left, training doctors have left us, another group have come in. And the feedback that we always get from our trainees is really, really positive. They enjoy the experience they get well looked after, they get good experience, and they enjoy working in East Lancashire, and that's great.
I think one of the problems, and we've discussed this before, was the reputation that East Lancashire Hospitals Trust had was quite damaged during the period of the special measures, and I'm glad to say from a patient's perspective that's now changed. But is that something that's changed within the industry?
Yes, I think very much so. I mean, if you think about where we were and where we are now, you know, we're recognised as being one of the top places to work in the NHS. Our staff satisfaction survey is one of the best in the NHS. Our clinical outcomes are really, really strong, and you know, we do really well in terms of attracting staff and attracting really high quality staff. The areas where we struggle to get staff are where they've got national shortages, and we're no different to anybody else in that respect. But I do believe the reputation of the organisation is strong. People want to come and work here, and we need to continue with that because we want to attract the best doctors, the best nurses, the best physiotherapists, the best staff of all disciplines, because they will look after our communities of the future.
You've talked about staff shortages in A&E. How are we going to solve that?
Well, some of it's long term, some of it is about how we think about how we train staff for the future, but we're looking at very imaginative things. So as well as just the traditional doctors and nurses on wards and department, we're looking to put physiotherapists, occupational therapists, pharmacists, and really have a much more of a multidisciplinary team looking after patients on wards and in A&E departments.
I'd like to change the mood a little. Let's lighten it a bit and talk about your new menus and the work that the catering department has done, and I'm pleased to say that the Patient Voices group has been involved in some of that, and in fact still are. Are you getting feedback from patients yet?
Yeah. I mean, just say thank you to you, Russ, and for Patient Voices group for the work that you've done around the new menus. I think it's really important that we recognise that when patients and their families come into hospital, it's not just about the clinical treatment, it's about the whole experience, and patient food and the menus are really important. So we've invested a lot of time, supported by yourself and your colleagues, to really look at the menus and to improve the menus, and we're getting some great feedback now from patients and their families in terms of the quality of the food that's offered.
And I think from a Patient Voices Group perspective, sort of looking in, you're also sort of investing quite heavily in how the staff welfare, so staff menus, and looking at what the staff eat whilst they're here working. And again, that's something that we're involved with, and so it's nice to see that you are in fact doing that.
No, absolutely. I mean, staff are our greatest asset. I know it's a cliche, but it's absolutely true. If the staff like working here, if we look after the staff, they will deliver better patient care. So everything starts and ends with the staff, and if we've got committed, motivated staff, we'll have the best clinical care.
We've recently heard quite a lot about the Pennine Lancashire Transformation Programme. What is it, and how is ELHT involved?
So we are very heavily involved in that work, and it's really looking to the future to say, look, we know we've got pressures in the NHS from a financial perspective. There are workforce pressures. We've got an ageing population with increasing expectations of what should be delivered, and quite rightly so. So how can we manage all of that and deliver the highest quality services? And I think it's fair to say that we are going to see changes nationally within the NHS about how and where services are delivered and how they're supplied. And the Pennine Lancs transformation work is about looking at that for our population and saying, how do we deliver those services, not just for the next 5 years, but for the next 30, 40, 50 years, and what will they look like, and how can we make sure they are the best possible quality and services? So one area we've been looking at is stroke services, for instance, and we've been looking at that both within East Lancashire but also across Lancashire. And I think it's fair to say that we can do better for our stroke patients across Lancashire. Some of that will be about how do we centralise clinical expertise. Some of it is about how do we share good practice. And for certain services, they currently take place across 5 or 6 locations across Lancashire. Is that the right thing to do? Could we do them better by having them delivered in 1 or 2 or 3 locations instead of the 5 or 6 locations? That will allow us to concentrate expertise and staff and really deliver better outcomes for patients. So that's what it's about. It's about looking for the future. I think it's really too early days to say exactly what that will mean in terms of services. But what I'm committed to are the residents of East Lancashire and Pennine Lancashire, and making sure we get the best possible services for our population.
So we're already seeing commissioners saying that they're going to have to make cuts to services like contraception and cosmetic surgery. We know that there is no money in the NHS. We know that the NHS is struggling, and we're expecting cuts. I think what we'd like to see is hospitals and commissioners engaging with patients to make sure that the services that are having to be cut aren't the ones that are going to impact on a lot of patients.
I think that's a really fair point, and I don't think it's something that we've got right in the NHS historically in terms of how we engage with patients and patient groups to make sure that they are involved in those decisions and they really influence those decisions. I would really hope that in Pennine Lancashire and part of the Pennine Lancashire work that we can get that engagement right and we can have a proper debate about what the services look like for the future. Because the last thing I want to be doing is falling out and arguing with people in terms of what the services should look like. My job is to try and provide the best possible services I can within the money that I've got available. There will always be choices within that, but I want everybody to be involved in those choices, and let's make those choices together.
Let's talk about something. Let's finish off on something which I think is quite innovative because I haven't seen it before. A button on your website, Contact Kevin. What's that all about?
So it's just really another way of trying to improve communication with staff or with members of the public who want to contact the trust. So it's a way that people can send emails directly through to myself. They can be letters of complaint, they can be letters of praise, they can be anything anybody wants.
Do you actually see these?
I see every one of them that's come through, and it's only been a couple of weeks since we've set it up, but I've received a number. I'm happy to say the majority to this point have been positive, not all, but the majority have been positive. And if there are questions, I respond to those questions.
I think that's great, actually. You've also got your AGM coming up on the 14th of September. What can we look forward to you reporting to us at the AGM? Obviously, you're not able to disclose everything, but what is the Trust looking forward to reporting?
So the way we do the AGM, I think it's a really nice, and it's a celebration event. So it's at Burnley Football Club. It starts from 2 o'clock in terms of we have lots of stores where the various departments and wards display what they do, and people can come in and talk to staff and see what we do. There's then what we call a series of conversations. Well, we're going to be talking about some of the changes in the NHS. We're going to be talking about the Pennine Lancs Transformation Board, and then the AGM itself starts at from 5:30. And really, I will be doing two things there. I'll be looking back on the previous year and lots of the good things that went on, but I'll also be setting the scene for this current year and what people can expect and some of the changes and some of the opportunities and challenges that we face.
Kevin McGee, who's the Chief Executive of East Lancashire Hospitals Trust, thank you.
Thank you, Russ.